it doesn't matter. 23-foot asteroid, it sounds big, but you got to figure how much of that's going to break up as it goes through the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a 23-foot asteroid is not
Nobody's too worried.
Big.
Nobody's too worried.
It just, to me, this is just showing that it was a slow news day.
Yeah,
there was just some media organization trying to spin this as the world is going to end. I mean, a 23-foot asteroid, you figure most of that breaks up in the atmosphere. The world's 70% water, so the chance that it hits land is extraordinarily tiny.
Well, let me go ahead and give you a hypothetical. If it wasn't a 23-foot one, I mean, these are your favorite things.
I know. I love it.
A Marcus hypothetical.
I love mind questions.
All right. So if it wasn't a 23-foot asteroid and it was a substantial one, let's go ahead and say it's a global killer. It's like what hit the dinosaurs.
Okay.
Do you want to know? 15 hours? Do you care? Or do you just kind of want to, I'd rather just, hang out, let it hit?
It's a tough question. I honestly have no idea.
All right. Well,
because I can think of, I'm actually torn right down the middle. Half of me would want to know, and half of me would want to just, die in a flame ball really quickly.
I mean, I have a feeling we'd hear about it because
if it's
I
substantial,
assume they'd see that one.
Yeah.
I assume they'd see that coming from at least the distance of the moon. Yeah. And if not, I mean, much farther, because they've already picked a couple that could come pretty close in the 2030s. And they're of substantial size. And I think we would know because I assume the Earth's governments would react with missiles. Yeah. They'd try something. But let's move on to our next topic.
That's just one of those informing you kind of.
Yeah, we just thought that was interesting that nobody told us anything. Anyways, go ahead with the next topic.
Okay, we've talked about this before, but I was in the middle of this film tax credit scandal thing where producers are getting money for things that they shouldn't and shouldn't be getting money for things that they should. Anyway, Culver said that he hadn't found out until the middle of September. There's actually a record showing that his office, one of his aides, found out in early August. And this is causing some serious trouble because they could have stopped this earlier and stopped the bleeding and saved the state of Iowa a bunch of money. So what do you think? Do you think that this is just miscommunication, or did Culver know and then didn't want to do anything? I mean, what are your first initial thoughts on this?
I highly doubt that Governor Culver knew and didn't want to do anything. If you have government waste, you have government waste. And this isn't the kind of government like conservative branded waste. This is actual waste where movie producers are getting thousands upon thousands to buy a car that they just keep and don't really use in a movie. I think this is something that everybody is pretty much against, and if he would have found out about it, he wouldn't have just sat there.
Do you think that the person that knew about it just didn't think it was a big deal, or was he trying to hide something? What do you think?
Well, I mean, this is based on, I don't really know who this person is, but I assume that they read it and didn't think much of it.
Yeah. Does this, okay.
When you would have heard, there's a film tax credit. All right. How much could be coming from that? We had no idea that it was essentially millions.
Yeah. So do you think that this is a snapshot of the Culver administration? I know I asked that question earlier, or is this just a thing that happened? And
this is a thing that happened, but again, people read headlines. People don't really care much beyond the headline. Yes, they might read the article, but the average newspaper reader, even though they're getting the newspaper, you'd assume they're more well-informed. They are more well-informed, but they only read about 2 paragraphs down in an article unless it's really interesting. So it's the headline what they remember, and that headline is going to brand this with Culver.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, he's one of his aides, so essentially he was picked by that. So if people are going to see that if he can't pick someone with good leadership qualities, then maybe he doesn't have that leadership quality.
Exactly. This is not going to help him.
I mean, even if it isn't his fault, the Branstad camp, and whoever else is going to make their bid for the Republican governor are just going to be all over this.
Oh, absolutely.
So I mean, he's just. I mean, it's just fodder for the Republican candidates, I think. But let's stick with another piece of local news here, and let's go on.
Yeah, you're going to have to explain this one.
Yeah, that's fine. State officials who oversee teaching licenses expressed frustration on Friday about an Iowa law which fueled their decision to protect the names of Iowans who accuse their teachers of abuse and other violations. The way that it works now is that if you accuse a teacher of, sexual harassment or fraud or anything like that, they will not tell the teacher who it is, or that a complaint has been filed by them. filed against them until after the investigation phase. That's what the law, that's what the law wants. The current law is that as soon as the complaint is filed, they get a copy.
Do you have an example of something?
They didn't really give an example.
Okay,
actually.
I didn't find one either.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Basically, the way that it works. Let me just try this again. The way that it works is you file a complaint against your teacher. He or she gets a copy of what it is, and I think they keep your name off of it. But they would know about it during the investigation phase. This new law, all it would do would be the teachers would not be notified until after the investigation phase, until after they research.
So they have no idea anyone has made a complaint until after it's all cleared.
Yeah.
All right.
What do you think about that?
What do I think? I don't really think that it's necessarily fair. However, I disagree. I think what's not fair here is that they don't get to ever see their accuser or know who their accuser is, because this article also described, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this article also described them not being able to see them in court either.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Well, once they went, I'm pretty sure that's what it said. But
I'm not doubting you.
In that situation, I think that this is what's negative. I do agree, though, that they don't necessarily need to know the investigation's going on, because a teacher could perform some kind of cover-up.
Yeah, exactly.
And assuming it's a parent complaining something about the student, the teacher has influence over the student. If they know whose parent made the complaint, something like that, they could react in a negative way toward that student. So I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think
hopefully I'm wrong about the court case part.
Yeah,
but that I certainly agree with them not knowing about the investigation.
There's no reason for them to need to know. I mean, because most of the time it's probably going to be nothing. It's probably just a teacher or a student's parents doesn't like the teacher, or the student doesn't like the teacher, and they shouldn't have to be burdened with that knowledge, because I just don't think they should have to deal with the thought that the student doesn't like me, or they're accusing me of this. That just would interfere with everyone else's education, and doesn't need to be brought to their attention until they found a reason to bring it to their attention. Because if it turns out to be just a fake, what's the point of burdening that teacher with that, when she could be using all of her he or she, I'm sorry, I'm sounding sexist now. He or she could be using that time or that thought, to help the kids, instead of worrying about I'm harassing somebody or something.
Yeah.
There's just no point for them knowing that.
Exactly. Let's go to our last article.
Okay. There is a meeting in Barcelona, Spain, about some UN climate change talks, and basically the developed nations, the bigger nations like the United Kingdom, the United States, and France, just to name a couple, are pretty upset because they're being forced to cut the most emissions to meet these climate control standards.
Emissions?
Yeah, it's emissions.
Oh, okay.
It's about CO2 emissions primarily, because that's what people consider the main cause. They're being forced to cover they're supposed to be cutting emissions between 25 and 40% by 2020, and developing nations are not being forced to cut not nearly as much as that. Yeah. So their big complaint, they don't think they should be forced to cut that. So do you think big nations like the UK and the US should be forced to cut the vast majority of that, whereas developing nations such as China, which they qualify as a developing nation, to continue to pollute and incrementally decrease their emissions, supposedly?
I don't really agree with that. It's always argued by these quote-unquote developing nations, although I would not call China a developing nation per se anymore. I think they're moving beyond that. They're still kind of in that phase, but it's the tail end of that phase. These developing nations always tend to argue that the green thing is almost a conspiracy to hold them down, because they're paying all these costs that the currently developed and dominating West don't have to pay anymore, because we're stable, we're at the top. They can have all these extra costs we didn't have to deal with when we were able to pollute just the sky like no other. So I think it's an interesting take, but I don't agree that they should get this escape, because then for the rest of the time, I mean, we can always make the argument, well, China doesn't do it, India doesn't do it, and it gives too many outs. Everybody needs to do it. Yeah,
I mean, not only that, but the biggest problem I see with this is it's not going to be legally binding. It's going to be, we promise. I mean, the UN has no...
Well, you can't, because it's invading on a country's sovereignty.
I mean, I just think it's just a big joke in that, you're not going to get countries like China and India to cut their emissions, and that by getting us to try and cut more than our share for them, I think that you're just going to run into a whole bunch of trouble.
I think that you'll hit economic troubles if you try to do that.
Yeah.
But all right, that is our episode of Informavores. And if you missed any part of this and you'd like to listen to it, or listen to the beginning of the episode or any section that you missed, you can find us on our YouTube channel. Just type in Informavores. If you have any subject suggestions, please email them to us at informavores11@yahoo.com or visit us on Facebook or Twitter. Again, just type in Informavores. Otherwise, that's it. Thank you for